You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, I'm Rich Bendis, host of BioTalk. And today with me, I have the president and CEO of Emergent BioSolutions, Dan Abdun-Nabi. And Dan's going to be talking about what's going on in this region, what's going on in Emergent, and why he thinks this is one of the best ecosystems in the world to be building a bio company. Dan, welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be here, Rich. Thanks for the invitation.
And since our listeners probably don't know much about you personally, or the company Emergent BioSolutions, since it's somewhat secretive in some circles, would you please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, how you end up getting to Emergent, and then a little brief background on Emergent BioSolutions?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that, Rich. So I've been in the biotech, biohealth space for over 30 years, back when nobody really knew what biotech was. And I grew up as a lawyer, and I started representing these young biotechnology companies that were developing all kinds of products, whether they were therapeutics or diagnostics or detection systems. That was sort of how I got introduced to biotechnology. And from being in a law firm, I went in-house and started working with a young vaccine company called North American Vaccine. And I was, I think, employee number 20 or 25. And I was there for about a decade. And at the end of it all, we had a number of approved products that were out and being sold. And North American Vaccine got acquired by Baxter, and I moved on to a diagnostics company here in the area as well. It was called iGen International. And I was with that company for a number of years, and then I joined Emergent before we went public. We went public in about 2006, and that's how I came to Emergent. Now, the history of Emergent is really interesting. That's a far more interesting story than the history of Dan Abdun-Nabi. What I would say is we're now approaching our 20th anniversary year. We were founded in 1998, and it was through the privatization of a facility that was owned and operated by the state of Michigan. And at that facility, they had about 12 FDA-licensed products, including the world's only FDA-approved product, a vaccine for the prevention of anthrax disease. So the governor of Michigan decided, what's the state doing in vaccine manufacturing? We know nothing about it. So they privatized the facility at a time when the facility was really out of compliance with FDA regulations. And our founder and executive chairman, Fouad El-Hibri, put together a small group of investors, and they put in a bid, and they acquired the facility. And they had to revalidate and renovate that whole facility in order to make it compliant with FDA requirements and to be able to continue to produce the anthrax vaccine. So fast forward about 20 years now, we've grown from one product, one location, to now where we have 8 marketed products. We have over 10 locations globally, 5 manufacturing locations. By the way, we have 3 of those manufacturing operations right here in Maryland. We have an R&D center, again, right here in Maryland, and global footprint, which includes about 1,300 employees. And the marketed products that we have are really unique. Many of them are only in-class products, and by that I mean they're the only product licensed by the FDA for their stated indication. And our mission is very simple, Rich. It's to protect and enhance life. And we do that by offering these highly specialized products to governments and other healthcare providers to address public health threats. And when we talk about public health threats at Emergent, we talk about things like chemical weapons or biological weapons or exposure to radiation or nuclear devices, explosives, as well as emerging infectious diseases like Ebola or Zika or pandemic flu. So we are in the high threat business, and we offer vaccines and therapeutics and auto-injectors and other devices. So it's a growing portfolio to address that very needy space.
One of the questions I have, you mentioned starting in Michigan. What was it that brought Emergent to the state of Maryland, and when did that occur, and how has this become sort of an epicenter for your growth now?
Yeah, great question. Michigan was a manufacturing operation, and the core competency of our site in Michigan is biologics manufacturing. I think we do it extremely well, and we've been historically very consistent in our ability to manufacture and deliver a product out of that facility. But it was not an R&D facility, and Emergent was looking to expand the portfolio of products it had and its capabilities. So we identified a company here in Maryland, right here in Gaithersburg, that we could acquire to give us a portfolio of products that were earlier stage in development, new technologies that we could develop further, and capabilities, core capabilities in the product development arena, whether it's assay development or whatever it might be, clinical development. And so this was an opportunity to expand our portfolio of product offerings. And the reason it ended up being here, number one, we found an opportunity here, but it's a very robust and rich ecosystem in Montgomery County and in Maryland in general. When you look at the number of biotech companies, the technologies that are here, the skill sets that are available, the potential collaborations with universities and the like, the opportunities are boundless. So for us, that was one driver. The other is very close to the customer. We were contracted with DOD at the time and since have expanded that to the Department of Health and Human Services, Department of State, Department of Homeland Security. So proximity to the customer and then proximity to the regulators. We're regulated by FDA, and it's important that we are able to have frequent interaction and dialogue with them as we're developing our products and manufacturing our products. So being able to be close to the FDA and have those discussions, also a key driver.
We talked to a lot of the companies that reside here as ones we're trying to recruit to the region about how important it is to have proximity. NIH, FDA, HHS, CMS. You just talked about that a little bit. Do you really think that that makes a difference in your ability to effectively operate Emergent on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, it's a huge difference. It really is a huge difference. The opportunity to interface face-to-face on very short notice, and those face-to-face interactions really personalize the relationship in ways that you can't achieve if you're 3,000 miles away on a telephone or on a conference call or even in a video conference setting. So being able to shake hands and talk about things maybe even beyond what was on the agenda, how's your family, learn a little bit about the people that you're interacting with, because in my experience, that personal relationship is so important to establishing trust and reliability and integrity, and that trusting relationship can really be beneficial in allowing the company to interact more effectively with the agencies that you're dealing with.
I think this relationship has been born to some new initiatives you have, especially with BARDA. You've created a new innovation center with them in partnership in Baltimore. Can you talk to the listeners a little bit about how that evolved and what they're actually doing down in that center?
That's really a point of pride within the organization, and I'm going to give you a little history before we actually get to the BARDA piece. We acquired that facility in Baltimore. It was a GMP, FDA-compliant manufacturing facility. It had 5 segregated suites. When we bought it, we had a very particular idea what we were going to do with it, so we demolished the inside of it, and then we had to make a key decision about how we were going to build that facility out. And at the time, and this is an interesting story in innovation, at the time, we had a choice. We could go with stainless steel, and you see these big bioreactors, all stainless steel. You see the tubing and the piping all the way through the facility, which carries with it an element of cost, an element of complexity in terms of operating the facility. At the same time, there was a very nascent new manufacturing technology that was coming into the fore, and it's called single-use bioreactor or subs. And what that enabled you to do was, in a disposable paradigm, to make your biologic products. So literally they are made in a vessel, but there's a lining that's a plastic bag. And once you're just done with the manufacturing, you simply decontaminate that bag and then you can dispose of it effectively. So when we decided to go with the single-use bioreactor technology, it was operating at 50 or 100 liters, which in our business is very small. But nevertheless, we made a bet on that future technology, and we built the whole facility thinking that eventually this technology would be the standard technology in the industry. So let's fast forward a few years, and as we looked at what BARDA was looking to do and what this facility was capable of doing, because it's all single-use bioreactor, we could make all manner of product. We could make viral product, we could make bacterial product, we could make vaccines, we could make therapeutics, you could do it in cell lines. The flexibility was enormous. And when the government evaluated the capabilities of the site and the fact that we could do quick changeover and quick development and get medical countermeasures available for deployment into areas of the world that need it very rapidly, they decided that they wanted a long-term partnership with us. So that facility in Baltimore is one of 3 facilities designated by the U.S. government as a center for innovation in advanced development and manufacturing. And we're very proud of that. So it's now made vaccine against Ebola, and we're making countermeasures for Zika as well. And it's actually designed to enable manufacturing against for pandemic flu, a vaccine for pandemic flu. So very exciting facility. We have a 25-year partnership with the U.S. government to support whatever medical countermeasures they may want.
I think when you have special purpose facilities like that, they're very expensive. And you need good partners when you're trying to develop a facility like that. So how has the state of Maryland been, the city of Baltimore, Montgomery County, and all of the other municipalities that you have to work with been to help support your growth in facilities as well as your workforce?
You do need collaboration from state and local government officials, and we've had support in many different ways. It's not just funding or credits of sort. It's the relationships that we've established that have, for example, very quickly enabled us to get a broader footprint in the area and get some land that was previously available to us for purchase, or speeding through the licensing and zoning process in a way that could meet our timelines so that we could then deliver whatever deliverables we have to our customers, whether it's the U.S. government or otherwise. So certainly the funding has been there, but more importantly, due to the relationships that we've established, the other, I'll call them less tangible benefits have really materialized. And the same is true not just in Baltimore, but here in Montgomery County as well. Good, close working relationships with the local government has facilitated our ability to grow and expand here in the state.
And then when you look around the world, really, people talk about clusters. And one of the things we've recognized, which a lot of people don't know, is that we have a very strong vaccine cluster within this region. So what is the benefit of having other people who are in the vaccine business be in your backyard? And what also it does to attract the quality workforce you need and maintain it as you're trying to build your business?
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on the key, which is talent. Talent in the vaccine space is limited. It's not a huge industry, and it tends to be fairly closed. And the ability to attract and retain talent in the vaccine world to companies like Emergent or other vaccine companies that might be starting up or more established, it's a critical component of an element of success. So the reality is businesses are composed of people, and if you have excellent people in your organization, you're able to retain them, then the likelihood of success goes up dramatically. So for us, one of the key components is attracting and retaining top talent. But it's also the opportunity to collaborate in the research and development space, share ideas on how to solve some thorny problems, whether they're assay problems or product development problems, or even avenues for advancing clinical programs in an accelerated way, and sharing information about what the regulatory authorities might be thinking about and new modes of regulatory approval. There was in our industry, for example, the animal rule, the FDA promulgated maybe a little bit over a decade ago. Very few products have been approved using the animal rule, but 2 companies that have done so, Emergent and one other, are located right here in this region. So it's an expertise that is unique, and it's a good example of why being in a cluster like this can be so beneficial.
We've focused a lot on vaccines, but as I've been reading the press clippings over the last 6 months or so, I've noticed that there's some diversification that Emergent's going through right now. Can you talk about where that diversification is and how it plays into your long-term strategy?
Diversification of the business is a critical component of our growth plan. And as I mentioned earlier, we started with 1 product, 1 location. And now we're up to 8 marketed products and a CMO business, a contract manufacturing organization business, as a service business to more than 20 products that are distributed globally by our customers. So that is an important element of our diversification as well. But we've expanded now. We have therapeutics that are marketed and in development. For example, we're looking to start a phase 2 clinical trial on an influenza therapeutic that is a rescue therapy. So if somebody has suffered influenza, they're in the hospital, in the ICU, it's an opportunity to provide a rescue therapy so that they can survive. As you know, influenza is a serious killer every year, with tens of thousands of people who die from that disease every year in this country. So it's a real opportunity. And we have a broad portfolio portfolio of antivirals that are being developed as well as antibacterial products. Interestingly, the newest products in the portfolio are devices, and the most recent of which is an auto-injector device, which addresses chemical threats. And our most recent customer for that product is the Department of State, and they're going to deploy these auto-injectors to the embassies around the world to protect against the threats of chemical agents. So the portfolio is growing in many different ways, and it is, for us, a key strategy as we think about growth.
Dan, one of the things that we've discussed for this region is we'd like to be a top 3 biohealth region by 2023. But I know that you're a little more impatient, and you've established some goals for 2020 for Emergent. Would you like to tell us a little bit about those goals?
Yeah, that's right, Rich. We have set some pretty aggressive goals for the organization. We have some financial goals, and we have some operational goals. We are looking to achieve $1 billion in revenue. We want to grow our global footprint, and we're targeting at least 10% of those revenues coming from international sources outside the U.S. So that's a pretty significant move for us. In addition, we want healthy growth at the bottom line. So we're targeting about 13% margin after tax on the bottom line. And we're going to do that by controlling our SG&A costs and by controlling R&D as well. Although we do anticipate expanding our R&D, unfunded R&D, over the course of the next couple of years as our portfolio begins to mature and we're in the clinic. On the operational side, we are looking for 6 products in advanced stages of development. And that could be phase 2, phase 3. At least half of them are dual market. And by dual market, what I mean, Rich, is that they address the needs of government customers so that they could be stockpiled or deployed with military personnel as necessary, but also could be sold in a more traditional, conventional setting, such as to hospitals or specialty clinics. A good example of that would be a flu antiviral, for example. If we had such a product, and we are working on a flu therapeutic right now, that could easily be a product stockpiled, but also sold on an annual basis to traditional customers. So it's very exciting. And that's just a first step along the way towards our longer-term vision, and we've captured that in a very simple phrase: protect and enhance 50 million lives by 2025. And we're well along the way. We're sort of in the mid-teens now, but with the recent acquisitions that we just completed, we actually believe we're going to hit that 50 million lives protected or enhanced way ahead of schedule. So stay tuned for more on that.
Well, as one of those lives, I appreciate your hard work. One of the things that you and I talked about 4 years ago, Dan, when I first met you, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. For listeners that don't know it, Dan is the vice chairman of the board for BioHealth Innovation and has been such for several years now. But one of the things we talked about when we first met was that you didn't know a lot of your peer group in the region, and you thought that joining the BHI board would be a good way to meet some of your peers within this industry. What do you think the role of CEOs and leaders in this region for community outreach and helping to interact with one another to help build this industry within the BioHealth Capital Region?
Yeah, I mean, it really starts at the top, doesn't it, Rich? You know, when CEOs get together and they talk about the way in which the ecosystem could be enhanced and buttressed and expanded, that permeates right down through the organization. So you have your EVPs and SVPs seeing that dialogue take place and knowing that the two CEOs are discussing ways in which that can happen. They too start that discussion. So it's almost like that top collaboration creates collaboration down through the organizations. So I've been very fortunate through my interactions with BHI and other organizations within the Maryland ecosystem to be able to get introduced to a lot of senior executives at a lot of companies that I wouldn't otherwise have been aware of. And that awareness allows the ecosystem to get tighter and stronger and to mature in ways that it otherwise wouldn't have.
Well, it goes way beyond BioHealth Innovation, Dan, because you've been selected by the governor to be on the Life Science Advisory Board and served as a co-chair for 2 years. And now, I guess you've been promoted in a way that's to be determined, to go to the Excel Maryland board, which is also a governor board appointed to evaluate how do we grow the economy of Maryland. Would you like to talk a little bit about your experiences on both the LSAB and Excel Maryland?
Yeah, it was a real honor to be selected by the governor to be chair of the Life Sciences Advisory Board. And the mission of that board was to come up with recommendations that could expand and enhance the life science industry in the state of Maryland. And that work, I can't take any credit. It was really the board itself, very much a working board. We broke up into teams, and they really identified some of the key hurdles that we're experiencing here in Maryland and how best to address and clear those hurdles to enable assets to be developed here and to grow here, talent to be educated, and how do we attract that talent, how to secure additional funding for companies that are young and maturing here in this and communications, how to enhance communications across the ecosystem. And I think the board came up with about 18 specific recommendations with the objective of really continuing to grow this region as one of the top regions in the country. And the recommendations were also designed to be very mindful of the budget constraints that we were operating under, given the limited budget that the governor had available, setting the stage for the next step in all of this, where maybe additional funding could be made available and we would have a much bigger opportunity to make an impactful move towards getting to the top one, maybe, or instead of top three ecosystems in the country. And that's where Excel came in. So the governor has set up this advisory council really to advise on what are the ways in which, not only in the life sciences industry, but also in the cyber industry, what are the ways that we could further advance those ecosystems to create Maryland as a real innovation hub for both of those critical markets.
I think when you were talking about, you mentioned Maryland and the governor, one of the things we've also recognized is that when you live in an economy that's regional, you don't care as an employer or a private sector corporation where your new products come from, where your employees live, where they come from. And one of the challenges we've had is rivers and bridges and county lines and state lines impacting the ability for collaboration within this region. Last year it was created the BioHealth Capital Region due to some branding initiatives that were done where 150 people came together and we created a brand. Do you believe that it's important that we find ways to bridge these gaps and go across the border to D.C. and to Virginia to find ways for us to enhance the ability for this collaboration that needs to happen within this region, Dan?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are some barriers. Some of them are artificial and some of them are quite real. And breaking down those barriers to allow a broader spectrum of companies to work together and collaborate more effectively. And as you know, Rich, technology is moving so quickly, and nobody has a monopoly on good technology. Nobody has a monopoly on good talent. And in particular, there's a convergence of technology. A good example is just the convergence in the artificial intelligence space and robotics and how that can affect manufacturing, or in detection and diagnostic systems in the way that they can communicate directly without any manual or individual participation. They can automatically communicate to third parties, whether it's a physician or to a hospital or an alert center or whatever it might be. So that convergence with the capabilities in this region, we have IT resources primarily in Virginia. We have life sciences here. We have hospitals. The convergence of these technologies actually demands that we break down these barriers and allow these companies to more effectively collaborate and work together.
Let's talk specifically about where your headquarters is, Montgomery County. We've had a county exec in Ike Leggett who had a vision probably 6 or 7 years ago and said, we're not getting a return on all of the assets that we have in the biotechnology industry. What do we have to do? And they formed a private sector-driven advisory group to come together, make some recommendations, which sat on the shelf for a while. And then eventually it resulted in the creation of BioHealth Innovation. Thank goodness, I hope. But if you were to look in the rearview mirror 5 years ago, what would you see as the 3 areas of progress you've noticed in this region? And then what are the 3 areas where we still have a gap that need to be addressed for the future?
A couple of the areas of real progress has been the recognition of the assets that exist in this region. I think people are much more aware of that. And as a result, we're seeing more connectivity today than we ever experienced in the last 5 years, as far as I know. And you gave us a good example, which is the conference that MedImmune has sponsored, now going into its fourth year. And it started out maybe 100 participants, and now it's up
to
over
1,100 last year.
1,100. That's just a perfect example of how the awareness and the connectivity that I've been talking about is materializing and is being realized. I think that's one area. The second area is we are seeing institutions establish a broader and more significant footprint here, particularly in the biohealth space. Johns Hopkins, for example, has now a facility that is located over on the Medical Center Drive area, and now they're talking about a much bigger campus over in the Bellward Farm. And so the future over the next 5 years and the contributions that can make in the life sciences area is significant. Or look at the universities at Shady Grove. They just got funding for a new biotech building, and now it's almost built out, and now they're going to be developing programs that will go into that facility. Or IBBR and the way that's starting to integrate into the ecosystem. So we're seeing a lot more in terms of the capabilities and the resources within this within Montgomery County that previously we just hadn't seen.
But we still have work to do. So as you look at those, all the good progress we've had, where are the areas you think we still need to do some work, Dan?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. One of the primary concerns we hear from companies in this space is access to capital. I have a great idea. I have a really good management team that I'm putting together, and the technology is very commercializable. It can go very, very, very long way, but I have no access to capital. So we've got to solve the access to capital problem, and I think people are thinking about ways in which that can be done. I know BHI is looking at setting up, a small fund that could give some incremental capital to allow companies to get to the Series A round. So this would be pre-Series A, attracting some of the venture capital firms down here, giving them some visibility into the ecosystem and the great technologies and the skills that are here. And the forum, I think, is one way in which that has advanced the ball. But access to capital is really key.
Well, we appreciate your perspective and the contribution you make in this region, Dan, and also to BioHealth Innovation. We want to thank you for being a guest on BioTalk, and hopefully we'll bring you back later in 5 more years when we hopefully are both here and this region has exploded.
It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed the conversation. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.